Topic: Emergency situations. Learners investigate emergency situations that can lead to refugees. To find out what situations commonly result in people becoming refugees. Find out what initial problems are typically faced by refugees. What mix of people will usually be present? What are their needs for shelter? What are their needs for food and water? Situations that cause people to become refugees. Emergency situations can cause large numbers of people to be forced from their homes. Emergencies not only affect people in areas where a disaster took place, but also the people in the area where the refugees are moved to. People need shelter, water, and food. A refugee camp has to be set up, and the camp needs to be very well planned. In emergencies, plans to help refugees need to be made very quickly to prevent further suffering. Two types of emergency situations that force people to leave their homes are war and natural disasters. You will learn about emergency situations and investigate ways to help refugees. Refugees, people who are forced to leave their homes during a disaster or in an emergency. Sometimes, refugees move to a safe area that is close by, and at other times, they have to travel to another country. Since the beginning of time, there have been wars between people all over the world, and while armies fight battles, people are forced to flee from their towns and villages. Over the centuries, many people have ended up as refugees. Even today, there are more than 3.8 million refugees all over Africa. These people have been chased from their homes because of wars. Natural disasters. Natural disasters are caused by nature and not by people. Below are examples of natural disasters. All of them can force people to leave their homes. Natural disasters usually happen with no warning. They can create emergencies very quickly, which means that people must move to safer areas immediately. In 2000, a terrible flood hit Mozambique and destroyed huge areas of farming land. Thousands of people lost their farms and were forced to flee to dry ground. Refugee camps were set up in other parts of Mozambique and also in South Africa. A natural disaster can also happen over a longer period of time. In Africa, we rely on rain to water our crops, but this continent often has droughts. Droughts can create emergencies for farmers. During long droughts, large groups of people can be forced to leave their homes and their farms. These people then look for food, water, and shelter, and they become refugees. Initial problems facing refugees. Disasters such as floods and wars happen suddenly, which means that people have to leave their homes quickly. These refugees will not have a lot of food and water with them. They will also not have tools or materials to build shelters. Emergencies that happen more slowly over longer periods of time include droughts or long wars. Refugees in situations like these have a bit more time to pack up their possessions and plan their journey. The type of emergency situation influences the mix of people in a refugee camp. Sometimes there will be more men than women. Other times, there will be many babies who are not able to walk yet, and small children. And at other times, there will be many elderly people who need special help and care. For example, during a war, there are usually fewer men at home because the men will be fighting. During a drought, babies and elderly people may die since they are more vulnerable. Different people have different needs for food, water, and shelter. Children become dehydrated more quickly than adults do, and they also need more high-energy foods. Old people need more warmth and blankets. Activity 1. Answer the questions. 1. Which emergencies happen suddenly, without warning? 2. How will these sudden emergencies affect each of the following? A. The mix of people in the group. B. The amount of food and water refugees have with them. C. The ability of refugees to build their own shelters. 3. Which emergencies happen slowly, over a longer period of time. 4. How will these slower emergencies affect? A. The mix of refugees in the group. B. How much food and water will they have with them? C. Whether they can build their own shelters or not. 5. Which emergencies are the most difficult to plan for? Explain why you say so. 6. Which emergencies are easier to plan for? Explain why you say so. Refugees in a foreign land. When refugees arrive at a refugee camp, they need many things, such as food, clean water, and shelter. These basic needs have to be supplied by the rescue workers who are setting up the refugee camp. In the following exercise, you will look at the experiences of people on either side of a refugee situation, refugees and the rescue and aid workers who are helping them. Activity 2. Situation: refugees in a foreign land. Discuss the situation below in class and then answer the questions on your own. Your answers should be short paragraphs. A sudden war has broken out between two small countries in Central Africa, and a large number of people had to flee to a neighboring country. Imagine what it must be like to be one of the refugees, and also what the situation would be like for the host nation. Host: a person who gives food, water, and shelter to another person. A host nation is a country that helps refugees from another country. 1. What do you think the mix of people in the group is like? Remember, this is a war situation and people had to flee from their country. Think about the ages of the refugees and write down which groups will need the most care and attention. 2. What are their needs for shelter? Remember that they have not brought many possessions with them. Who will provide the shelters or the materials needed to build them? 3. What food and supplies do the refugees need? Remember that the refugees have been traveling on foot for long periods of time. Think about the ages of the people. Will some of them need more food and water than others, and if so, why? Will some people have special needs, and if so, why? Activity 1. Answers. 1. Fires, floods, and conflicts like war can happen without warning. 2. A. In wars, men and older boys often have to leave. The people who remain behind are mostly women, the aged, children, and disabled people. B. Sudden emergency situations often mean that there is no store of food, and access to clean water may be limited. When it is caused by fire or flood, most of the provisions will have been destroyed, leaving the people without supplies. C. When fires and floods have destroyed settlements, the materials to rebuild are often also destroyed or washed away, and tools are not available. In wartime, if people have to move, they may not be able to find suitable materials, have the tools, or even find suitable ground to build on. 3. Droughts and loss of crops happen over a longer period of time. 4. A. When food or water is scarce, weaker people will become ill and possibly die sooner. Old people, sick people, and infants will be the first to suffer. Men and women might leave the settlement to try find work or food in other areas, and this will reduce the number of strong people. B. Food stores and water will reduce very quickly if they are not resupplied. Food has to be brought in from other places, and sometimes the little water that is left for the people becomes polluted and needs to be cleaned. C. A drought should not affect shelters, but it won't be possible to build many new shelters because there will not be wood for frames or reeds and grass for thatching. 5. Sudden emergencies such as floods and fires are unexpected and are more difficult to plan for. Communities can plan in some ways for these emergencies, but it is difficult to store enough food. 6. Longer-term emergencies can be planned for, since there is accurate weather forecasting that can predict when long droughts will occur. Communities can plan for these droughts by storing food, looking for alternative sources of water, and making sure that the elderly and the young will be properly cared for during difficult times. Activity 2. Answers. 1. Because it is a war situation, the younger men will probably have to join the army. The group will consist mainly of women, children, and older men, sick and disabled people. The people who will need the most attention are young children, the elderly, and people who are ill or disabled. 2. The refugees will have only what they could carry, so probably no materials or tools. The host nation will have to supply them with shelter. This will probably be temporary, so tents and simple shacks will be put up. 3. The refugees will need the same amount of food and water in their camp as they lived on before. They will need to eat nutritious food that will keep them healthy. Growing children and young adults will need more food than the elderly. Water will need to be plentiful and clean. Dirty water can carry diseases such as cholera, which is deadly.